The studio lights burned hot as the audience settled into their seats, expecting the usual lively banter. Joy Behar leaned forward with a knowing smile, tossing out a sharp remark framed as a joke, the kind that usually drew applause before anyone could challenge it. Kevin Spacey didn't interrupt at first. He listened, still and composed, hands folded loosely, eyes steady. When his turn came, he didn't raise his voice or lean into drama. He leaned into clarity. Calmly, he began to peel back the assumptions behind the comment, pointing out how easy it is for television to reduce people to headlines instead of hearing full stories. The room shifted. Laughter faded into curiosity. Joy tilted her head, eyebrows raised, clearly amused but also alert. She countered with another quip, sharper this time, designed to regain control. The audience chuckled out of habit. Kevin waited until the sound died down, then spoke again, slower now, his tone measured. He explained how public conversations often reward outrage more than understanding, how a punchline can land even when it misses the truth. He wasn't attacking, he was dissecting. Each sentence felt deliberate, like a chess move placed not to shock but to corner the argument itself. The other hosts exchanged glances. This wasn't going the way these segments usually did. Kevin leaned slightly forward, not invading space, just enough to signal engagement. He talked about accountability, but also about fairness, about the difference between asking hard questions and making easy judgments. His words didn't accuse Joy directly. Instead, they reflected the conversation back at the table, forcing everyone to see its shape. The audience grew quiet, not uncomfortable, but attentive, as if they realized they were witnessing something unscripted. Joy tried to steer the moment back toward humor. She joked about actors being dramatic by nature, drawing a ripple of laughter. Kevin smiled briefly, acknowledging the joke, then gently redirected. He spoke about storytelling, how stories can be weapons or bridges, depending on how they're told. Television, he said, has power, and with power comes responsibility. The phrase hung in the air. A camera operator adjusted position, sensing the shift. This was no longer banter. It was a conversation with stakes. He shared an anecdote about being misunderstood early in his career, not as a plea for sympathy, but as an example of how quickly narratives form. He emphasized listening, really listening, before deciding who someone is. His voice never rose, but it carried. Joy's smile tightened, not hostile, just thoughtful. She responded with a pointed question, challenging whether public figures should expect gentleness in public scrutiny. The audience murmured, sensing the tension climb. Kevin nodded, welcoming the challenge. He agreed that scrutiny is part of the deal, but he questioned whether cruelty needed to be. He asked, rhetorically, if being tough meant being careless. The question landed softly but firmly. One of the co-hosts shifted in her seat, glancing at Joy, then back to Kevin. The usual rhythm of the show, quip, laugh, move on, had slowed into something more deliberate. Joy attempted to reclaim the upper hand with a rapid-fire comment, referencing public opinion and ratings. Kevin responded not by disputing numbers, but by reframing purpose. Ratings, he suggested, show what people watch, not necessarily what they value. Sometimes audiences stay because conflict is familiar, not because it's nourishing. The word nourishing seemed out of place on daytime television, and that's why it worked. A few audience members nodded. He paused, letting silence do some of the work. In that quiet, the cameras captured faces leaning forward, eyes intent. Kevin continued, emphasizing that disagreement doesn't have to be humiliating to be compelling. He wasn't lecturing, he was inviting. Joy inhaled, clearly preparing another retort, but hesitated. The hesitation was brief, yet noticeable. For the first time, she seemed to weigh her response rather than fire it off. She finally spoke, half smiling, half defensive, suggesting that television thrives on sharp edges. Kevin agreed, but added that sharp edges can cut both ways. He spoke about empathy not as weakness, but as discipline, the discipline to see complexity where simplicity sells better. The phrase struck a chord. The audience, once primed for applause lines, now listened for meaning. A producer's voice murmured faintly in someone's earpiece, urging them to move along. Joy glanced sideways, then back at Kevin. She made a lighter comment, trying to transition, but Kevin gently asked for one more moment. It was a bold move, yet delivered with politeness. He thanked the hosts for the platform and said conversations like this matter because they shape how people speak to one another beyond the studio. As he finished, the applause came, not thunderous, but sustained. It wasn't cheering for a win. It felt like appreciation for honesty. Joy nodded slowly, offering a brief, measured response that acknowledged his point without conceding fully. The tension hadn't exploded. It had crystallized. Viewers could feel it through the screen, a rare pause in the noise of television where words mattered more than momentum. The camera cut to commercial moments later, but the atmosphere lingered. Backstage, producers whispered, audience members exchanged glances, and social media feeds began to buzz. Something unexpected had happened. Part one of the moment ended not with a punchline, but with a question left hanging in the air, one that would demand an answer when the show returned. When the show returned from commercial, the mood had shifted in a way no script could correct. The applause that usually welcomed the hosts back felt restrained, almost cautious, as if the audience sensed they were stepping back into unfinished business. Joy straightened her papers, glanced briefly at the camera, and offered a practiced smile. Kevin sat calmly, hands resting on the table, his expression neutral but attentive. The space between them felt charged, not hostile, but alert, like a room waiting to see which direction a door would swing. Joy opened with a light transition, acknowledging the break, then circled back with a comment meant to soften the edge of what had just happened. She framed it as healthy disagreement, emphasizing that the show thrives on diverse opinions. Kevin nodded in agreement, but when he spoke, he took the idea further. Diversity of opinion, he said, only works when people feel safe enough to express complexity without being flattened into caricatures. His voice remained even, but the words landed with quiet insistence. One of the co-hosts jumped in, attempting to balance the exchange. She spoke about audience expectations, about how viewers tune in for strong personalities and sharp exchanges. Kevin listened respectfully, then responded by distinguishing strength from volume. Strength, he suggested, can be calm. It can ask questions instead of delivering verdicts. The audience responded with a ripple of applause, not loud, but affirming. Joy leaned back, folding her arms loosely, considering her reply. When she spoke, her tone shifted, less teasing, more pointed. She challenged Kevin directly, asking whether public platforms have an obligation to be gentle when discussing powerful figures and controversial topics. The question was framed as practical, not personal. Kevin accepted it as such. He clarified that gentleness wasn't the goal, integrity was. He argued that integrity demands accuracy, context, and restraint, especially when millions are listening. The exchange began to feel less like a confrontation and more like a debate that had accidentally found its depth. Cameras caught the audience's faces, some nodding, some frowning, many simply focused. Joy counted again, suggesting that television is, at its core, entertainment. Kevin agreed, then added that entertainment shapes culture whether it intends to or not. What we laugh at, he said, teaches us what we are allowed to dismiss. The line drew an audible reaction, soft gasps, then applause. Joy paused. The pause was longer than before. When she spoke, she acknowledged the point without fully yielding, saying that satire and humor have always challenged power. Kevin smiled slightly, agreeing once more, but drawing a line between challenging power and simplifying people. He spoke about nuance as something audiences are often denied, not because they can't handle it, but because it's harder to package. The producer's voice was again faintly audible, urging movement, but the table held its ground. A co-host attempted to lighten the mood with a joke about philosophy on daytime TV. Laughter broke the tension briefly. Kevin laughed too, then used the moment to bring the conversation home. He said that conversations like this matter because they don't end when the cameras stop. They echo in living rooms, in comment sections, in how people talk to each other when they disagree. Joy listened, chin resting lightly on her hand, eyes narrowed not in anger, but concentration. Joy responded with something unexpected, a personal reflection. She spoke about years in television, about learning when to push and when to pull back. She admitted that the pace of live TV sometimes rewards speed over reflection. The admission softened the room. Kevin acknowledged it, thanking her for the honesty. The audience applauded again, this time warmer, as if recognizing a rare moment of candor. The conversation began to wind down, but not because it lost energy, because it had reached a point of mutual recognition. Joy summarized their exchange in her own words, emphasizing disagreement but also respect. Kevin agreed, adding that respect doesn't mean agreement. It means listening long enough to understand what you're rejecting. The phrase lingered. Even Joy smiled at that, a small, genuine curve of the lips. As the segment closed, the host announced the next topic, but the energy didn't immediately follow. Viewers could sense that something had shifted. This wasn't a viral shouting match or a walk-off moment. It was something subtler, and perhaps more unsettling for television, a reminder that calm can be more disruptive than chaos. After the show, Clips began circulating online, stripped of context, as clips always are. Some framed it as Kevin winning, others as Joy holding her ground. But many viewers noticed something else entirely, a moment where the usual roles blurred. Comment sections filled with unexpected reactions, people surprised by the tone, by the restraint, by the fact that no one had exploded. Backstage, crew members whispered about how tense it had felt, how real. Joy, passing by a producer, remarked that live TV still manages to surprise her after all these years.